Hi, everyone. My name is Allison. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the executive director of the Gallatin County Democrats, and I am thrilled to have two of our elected representatives with us today to talk about what's happening in the Montana Legislature and what comes next. So we have Representative Jim Hamilton, who represents House District 61, and we have Representative-elect Kelly Kortum from House District 65. So if you two could just quickly introduce yourselves, and then we'll just have a conversation about what's going on.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Allison said, I'm Jim Hamilton and I represent the east side of Bozeman from about Rouse out to the Park County line, Langer Campground up to Sipes Canyon. And Kelly, I noticed that your screen now says Rep-elect. Congratulations about that.
Thank you, Jim. Hi everyone. I'm Kelly Kortum. I'm a first-time legislator coming in. I'm very excited to be elected here in House District 65, which is the north and west portions of Bozeman, and also the district with the most active voters in the state. So that's exciting too. Excited to be here and have a conversation with you both.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're grateful for your time because right now it feels like there isn't that much going on, but at the same time, I know there is a lot going on. So the two of you just participated in the caucuses for the House caucus, and then there was also a Senate caucus. So that was on the 18th, Wednesday the 18th. So Kelly, what was your first impressions? What was that experience like the first time?
I had a good time. It was a very kind of unifying event, the caucus with the rest of my fellow Democrats. We did hold it almost entirely by Zoom. There were a couple people in person in Helena, which is the traditional method of doing it. But for safety reasons with COVID, we most of us stayed home and did it remotely like we're doing now. It was nice to hear everyone introduce themselves and kind of get an idea where geographically we're all from, so we can kind of keep that in mind as we're working with each other in the future. So I would say my first impression of the caucus was very good. Orientation was a little different, but we'll talk about that later.
Sounds good. Yeah, because this was a couple days of work, right? First time working. So Jim, what was different this time, or like right now, what's different other than the obvious we're in the midst of a pandemic?
Yes. Well, it really did change the dynamics a lot. The early part of Wednesday was the election of leadership, and normally you have somebody get up and do a little nominating speech, and somebody gives a speech, the candidate gives a speech, and both candidates do, and then we vote, and there's this little excitement. Well, it changed for two reasons. One is we're in the middle of a pandemic, but also because we only had one candidate for each of our leadership positions. So that was different than I've experienced before. The other benefit of those caucuses is there's so much side conversation going on, and we missed that. So that's kind of a handicap, I think, for Kelly, is he didn't get to do that part.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I mean, usually you would all be together in Helena. I'm sure there'd be like meals together and things like that. So what are some ways that you're all thinking about how you can still do that, but maybe virtually, like if there's any talk of that yet?
I guess I would answer that, and Kelly, let you jump in too, and that is that I'm not sure we've got a solution for that yet. There is so much uncertainty about how the session's going to look, which we can talk about a little bit more later, that I think we're sort of as a group focused on that, and the new people are focused on getting their paperwork done and figuring out how they're ever going to push a button or something. That maybe we haven't gotten to that yet. And I think it'll come soon, and it'll just depend on the structure of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kelly, what were the highlights from the last few days, and then what were some of your concerns, like with the orientation and just how all of that worked?
Thank you. the highlight was definitely the caucus, and hearing our new minority leader, Kim Abbott, speak and kind of rally us and get us all looking in the same direction strategically, because it's definitely going to be a tough year as far as the numbers have shown. So that was nice. My concerns are many. This orientation was a bit different. It didn't feel as prepared as I'd like. And as soon as our caucus was over and we took a look at the other caucuses and how everybody was mingling in Helena, I got really, really concerned. I saw a lot of, particularly on the other side of the aisle, a lot of in-person handshakes and hugs and not mask wearing in close proximity. And it was being concerned with public safety. It really rattled me. That single event was probably a super spreader event. And not only will it affect all the legislators there, but a lot of these people will go home to their communities now and spread it in their communities. And that will have an effect on the local healthcare system there. So just this little tiny 2-day incident or meeting has huge implications. What are we going to do there for months and months? It is not sustainable. It is my biggest concern. However, and that also lends to if you're more cautious about public safety, you have more to worry about here. Whereas the folks that aren't can do whatever they want, and it allows them to do some of that in-person communication that we found lacking, I guess, in this new medium. So that's my biggest concern. Is it's just not going to be equitable and fair to all our constituents when some people follow the rules and some don't. So that's, I guess, one big concern I have.
Pretty big one. You're not alone in having that concern. Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I was talking to a staff member this morning, and we'd had a meeting yesterday and we're following up on it. And what I said to them is that my biggest concern would be, how do we do this? You know, we sort of made a choice to run and put ourselves in the situation. We didn't know it was going to be a pandemic when we decided to do this, I suppose. But you know, we're making some choice, and our staff members are not making a choice. And so one of the things that would be a big concern for me, and that I would want to really push for, is that even if we as legislators have to be present, our staff does not need to be present. They are perfectly capable of doing what they've got to do from a remote location. And we should afford them that privilege. So I think that's where I would be most focused.
That's good. So all that aside, like, what is it that you do between now and when the session starts on, is it January 4th? Is that when it starts? Yeah. So between now and January 4th, what are you doing like to prepare for maybe not logistics, but like bills and you know, what committees, how are committees determined, like that kind of general, like how does this really work?
So you obviously don't really want to talk about logistics, but logistics are actually a part of this, and it's because people are wrapping up their jobs. They're trying to find a place to live if we're going to have to live up there, but they don't know if they have to live up there yet. So there is a lot of logistics, and it is surprising how much that comes to play in about the last 3 weeks in particular. But that's not the fun part. The fun part is, so what actually happens in the legislature? Right now, committee assignments are being made. We may very well know those this afternoon. If not this afternoon, probably tomorrow. Okay. Each legislator puts in their request for their top 3 requests for each of, in this case, probably 3 committees. And then the leadership team is going to parse those out and figure out who would be the vice chair in each committee and so forth. That's kind of the big things that are going on right now, and some other sort of legislative-based logistics, like where are you going to sit and where are you going to park, and you know, getting a name badge and getting stationery. There's a whole bunch of stuff that Kelly's having to go through that those of us who have been around, this is my 3rd term, don't have to do quite as much of. So that's a lot of what happens now. Then we have a little bit of a quiet space in any external activities, but this is the time where legislators are really beginning to work on their bills. And they've put in bill titles. They've probably been contacted by their bill drafters, and now they're beginning to get down to the nitty gritty. So Kelly, why don't you talk about that? Have you put in some bill titles and been contacted by a drafter already?
Thanks, Jim. I haven't actually started submitting my bills yet. I think the deadline was the end of December to get your top 5 priority ones in. Is that correct?
Really, you have, have to look these up. It's December 5th, I believe, is the date for your initial set of bills. And then you're given the opportunity to put in more later, but there's no guarantee that they might get worked on. But pretty much the start of session is the end of that. As an example, I have right now, and probably will not end up running this many, but I have 14 bill, maybe more than that, maybe 15 or 16 bills in, and spent this morning working on 5 of those, communicating, solving problems, redoing the language, etc. So that's what will happen for most of us between now and January 4th. There are a couple of specific things that will be of interest to a lot of folks, and one of those is the rules meeting in the 8th of December. The 8th of December, I think, is going to be very critical for determining how this session is held. You mentioned earlier, well, how does it get resolved on how it's held? Right now, the leadership is talking to each other and trying to negotiate out something. And that's probably all 4 leaders from both houses. So House and Senate, and both Democrats and Republicans. They may come to one conclusion, and the Rules Committee may come to a different conclusion. Historically, the Rules Committee has been pretty stacked with a lot of people from the hard right. They hold the majority, of course, and so they get to do that. And last session, I think it was maybe 20 people on the committee, 12 of which were Republicans, 10 of which were hard right Republicans. So that's going to be a very important date, and probably I'd say to anybody tuning into this, that's the next thing you really want to watch for.
Okay. So will the Rules Committee be set like right now, or is it they already, like, is that kind of what we're working on right now, is figuring out who's on the committees? And so we'll know, soon that who's actually on that Rules Committee.
Yes. Once again, it's there are 3 committees that are not sort of common on call or regular committees. They're on call, rules being one of them. And so, it could be possible, for example, that Kelly could be on 3 committees and on one of the on-call committees. Yeah. So that'll all be set, and surely we'll know by Monday. I said maybe tomorrow, but surely we'll know by Monday. Okay. And then they'll begin formulating their plans, and we'll know who's on the committee, and that probably gives us a pretty good picture of how it's going to turn out.
Got it. So Kelly, what were your top committees that you wanted? What were your preferences?
Mine changed quite a bit over the course of discussing with everyone, people that have just started and people that have been through this, and people that served on those committees in the past. I got a really good impression of how each committee's ran, and I kind of ended with my top most important committee being state administration, where they handle how elections are executed, and the safety of just how the state is run. So that was the top committee I applied for. If that one doesn't happen, business and labor was another interesting one to me. I think Jim described it as kind of solving a new problem every couple days, which really appealed to me. I really like kind of that generalist top-down view of all the problems in the state, and you get a real good idea of what each community needs. So that was exciting. The B committees, I was interested in energy, telecom, and federal relations, which will fall into one of my big interests, which is internet and rural broadband. So hopefully I get on that committee and get to help expand internet access across the state, because it's really, really essential right now during the pandemic, and always, because it's the new economy.
Right. Yep.
I also offered to help with ag or transportation as a C committee, and ethics committee first on call. So we'll see where they think I belong best there. I have some ag background, so I might actually be valuable as a city Democrat to that committee as well. But yeah, pretty excited to see where I end up.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, what about you?
So I just wanted to say one thing about Kelly's, and that is I was on ag my first session, and yes, they need a city Democrat who understands ag. So that I sort of hope you end up there. Maybe not for your benefit, but for our benefit.
You are a public servant now, after all.
Right. Let's see. Appropriations is the committee I was on last session, and I want to be on appropriations again. Appropriations has 6 then subcommittees that you're on, and they look at each different sections of the budget. And in my case, that my preference would be education. Last time I was on Section A, which is general government. And having been around a while longer, I didn't put down a second choice. So I figure I'm getting my first choice.
Got it.
That may be wishful thinking. And then I do want to be on the rules committee. Spent a lot of time on the rules, and I think that's going to be so important this time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And by the way, as an appropriations member, you really are not, you don't have time to be on another committee because of the way it meets. And so the first 45 days, you're in your subcommittee, and the last 45 days, you're in the main committee all the time. I mean, and could be literally all day long. So you don't have a second choice, really. You can't be on approps and taxation, for example.
Sure, that makes sense. That makes sense. So that kind of leads me to my next question, which is about one of the other meetings that happened during this 2 days with the session, or the new legislators, was the revenue estimating presentation. And so Jim, if you could share a little bit about what that was and what you learned in it.
Well, I'll try to be brief on this because it can get kind of dry. The Revenue Interim Committee has one responsibility in interim, and that is to set the estimate upon which the budgets are built when we get to Helena in January. And 2 different groups come in with an estimate for us to look at. One is the Legislative Fiscal Division, which is really our staff, legislator staff. And the other is the Office of Budget Program and Planning. I always get that wrong, OBPP, and that's the governor's budget office. So they each come in with an estimate, and then we quiz them and try to divine which way we think we should go. It's devolved, I would say, from a practice of trying to get the right answer and figure out what's going on to political football, unfortunately. This time they came in about $155 million apart. Sounds like a lot, but it's less than 3% of the state budget, the state general fund. So you could kind of say that's almost within the margin of error, and you could choose one or the other and be done with it. But there are some significant differences, and more importantly, to us as legislators, the ending fund balance in the budget is what triggers bad things. If we end up with too little ending fund balance, we'll end up in a special session or automatic cuts. And so what seems like a tiny little bit of money in the budget, say $50 million, is basically a rounding error in Helena, can be very significant in terms of the ending fund balance. So that's the dilemma. What happened yesterday is, and I guess I'll be partisan here, what happened yesterday was that the Republicans sort of chose a number out of the sky and couldn't justify why they chose it, and then we passed it out over my objections. And that's, it sounds horrible and it was, I think, poorly done. But the bottom line is they will also probably change the estimates during the session. Probably in April would be the logical spot to meet the needs that they have of either providing tax cuts or cutting spending or whatever it is they're going to choose to do. So no harm done that they didn't treat this as seriously as I'd like them to treat it, because there'll be another run at it.
Got it. It's a moving target, in other words. Yeah. Okay.
And although right now revenue actually looks quite good, in fact, the estimates really changed a lot from August to now. Okay. It may be with another leg of the pandemic happening here, it may be that that slows things back down. And so we expect that there'll be a sort of a different number in January and February and March than there is right now. We'll see.
Got it. Thank you. So what else should we be paying attention to for the next, let's see, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 6 weeks, between now and when the session starts? Like, what can we do to start preparing ourselves to help you and to know what's coming in the session?
Good question. You want to try that, Kelly, or want me to go first?
I'll give that a go. The legislature is elected citizens, and as a constituent, we all have the ability and option to tell them what we think at every moment on every bill they're considering. And we should. Now that I'm about to be in that position, I'm telling you, when you have an opinion on a bill, let me know. There's all sorts of ways to contact your legislators, and some of them are easy and some of them can be more detailed if you're really into a subject. But learning how to communicate with your elected officials is an essential part of how government works. So hopefully in the next few weeks, we talk to our people either in our district or our party or our central committee and train them in how to communicate with their government. And that would be my number one thing, because there's going to be a lot of weird bills coming through and we need public input on all of them. And it can drastically change the outcome on some of these. So that would be my pick. Do you have more to add, Jim?
Actually, I like what you said. Not so much in these next 5 weeks until January do we have an opportunity to have the public react to bills, because they don't know what bills are being introduced. And it doesn't do any good really to talk about a bill until it is introduced, because it might get shelved. Lots and lots of bill titles are put in that never see the light of day. But I think what I really like about what you said was that teaching the public how to communicate with us. What's the best way to get the message across? And I think that would be a great topic for one of our future Zoom calls here, because I think you're right. I think that's very important. The other thing I would say that I would focus my attention on would be right now, Governor-elect Gianforte has set up advisory committees for numerous agencies to advise him on the hiring of candidates there. And that's usually only the directors. I guess it could be in some cases an assistant director, but that's kind of rare. Mostly they're hired, not appointed. And so I think talking to those folks, communicating with those advisory members about what's important to you would be something that the Central Committee or those interested in activities of the Central Committee could be doing. That'd be very useful in the next 4 or 5 weeks.
That is awesome tip. Yeah.
Those directors, I mean, it's a difficult situation because you don't know who the candidates are, but it may be that they end up floating out 3 candidates and kind of running them up the flagpole, and that's an opportunity as well. I was talking to the Department of Revenue this morning, and one of the things that they said is, you've been used to, Jim, that we come in support of things that protect the budget and allow us to continue to provide services. Now you will likely see a director of revenue who comes in and supports the opposite. A common bill is to give breaks on pensions, to like military people, for example, that was a bill that has come up where they want all military people to have a pension that's tax-free in Montana. And it might have been that a Department of Revenue director would have come into that with that bill and said, we like the idea, we think they should be rewarded for their service, but we don't have another way to replace it in the budget. Whereas you might see the opposite of that right now. So these directors can be extraordinarily important.
Good to know. Well, that's a good tip, and we will work on that and then suggest that to others. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for the conversation. Is there anything else any closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to share before we shut it down today?
I just want to say thank you for doing this, Allison. It's a great opportunity for us to get a chance to communicate, and maybe at some point communication will go back the other way as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you both. Kelly, any last thoughts?
I second what Jim said. I'm thankful for this opportunity to talk about what's coming, and very thankful for you and our local central committee getting the word out there and getting us all prepared for what's going to be a wild 4 months, I think.
Yes, well, it's been a wild year, so next year probably is going to be the same, and we're ready for it, and we're grateful to you and all of our other elected officials who are doing the best they can for the public health and well-being of all Montanans. And with that, thank you so much, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.